Fake HOA cops punched my wife, her Navy SEAL husband knocked them out. The sound of fists hitting flesh is something you never forget. That night, it echoed in my soul. My wife, Sarah, had only stepped outside to ask why a group of men were loitering near our driveway, claiming to be HOA compliance officers. They wore cheap tactical gear, fake patches stitched on their shoulders, and carried themselves with the arrogance of authority. Before she could even get an answer, one of them struck her. I wasn't supposed to be home that evening. My SEAL team had just finished a grueling training exercise, and I'd returned early, hoping to surprise Sarah with dinner. Instead, I stepped out onto the porch just in time to see her fall to the ground, clutching her cheek. That was the moment everything inside me changed. People often ask what makes a SEAL dangerous. It's not just the weapons, the training, or the endurance. It's the discipline. The ability to turn pain into precision, fear into strategy. And in that moment, when I saw the woman I love, the woman who waited for me through every deployment, who raised our son when I was halfway around the world, struck down by cowards, I became something they couldn't begin to understand. I walked toward them slowly, deliberately, like a storm building strength. "Step away from her," I ordered. My voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made even hardened men hesitate. They laughed. One sneered, "This is HOA business." She got in the way. HOA business? I knew immediately this wasn't about property lines or dues. This was a scam. These weren't officials, they were predators who picked the wrong house. The man closest to Sarah tried to shove me. That was his mistake. The next few minutes blurred into instinct and muscle memory. My fists moved faster than their eyes could follow. A kick dropped one to the ground. I twisted another's arm until his fake badge snapped off and clattered to the pavement. Each one that came at me went down harder than the last. They weren't trained, not really. They thought intimidation was power. They'd never met someone who lived by discipline, by precision, by the iron promise to protect his family. Sarah, dazed but strong, had managed to crawl back toward the porch, her eyes fixed on me. Even through her pain, I saw pride in her gaze. She knew what I was fighting for. Not just revenge, not just anger, but love. The ringleader tried to pull a weapon from his belt, but I was faster. A disarm, a strike, and he was face down in the dirt, his fake credentials torn from his vest. Sirens began to wail in the distance. I had already triggered the silent alarm when I stepped outside. Real law enforcement was on the way. When the deputies arrived, they found the so-called HOA enforcers cuffed with their own zip ties, groaning on the ground. Sarah, bruised but standing tall, gave her statement with steady conviction. It turned out these men had been hired by a corrupt HOA president who wanted to scare families into paying fees that didn't exist. They targeted us because my wife had refused to bow down to their threats. But what they didn't know was that behind Sarah stood a husband who had survived the harshest training on earth, who had faced enemies overseas, and who would never allow injustice on his doorstep. The HOA president was arrested, the fake cops charged, and the neighborhood finally understood the truth. For years, people had whispered about corruption, but fear kept them silent. That night broke the silence. Later, as I held Sarah in my arms, I whispered, "They'll never touch you again." She smiled through her swollen cheek and said, "I knew you'd protect me." That's when it hit me, this wasn't about a fight in a driveway. It was about the promise I had made the day we married, to be her shield, her anchor, her partner in every storm. Strength isn't just in muscles or training, it's in loyalty, love, and the refusal to let darkness win. That night, I didn't just knock out a group of thugs pretending to be authority figures. I reminded my wife, my neighbors, and myself that no matter what disguises evil wears, it will always fall when faced with courage and love. And as long as I breathe, no one will ever harm my family again.